The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered overhead, casting long, uneven shadows across the sterile walls of the Naval Base Detention Center. Lieutenant Kara Phoenix Daniels sat rigid in the cold metal chair, the handcuffs biting into her wrists. Each metallic click that reminded her of her restraint sounded louder in the silent room. Around her, whispers swirled like a storm, bouncing off the gray walls. "She's just a pilot," one muttered, eyes darting nervously. "She shouldn't be here." Another guard muttered something about unauthorized access, shaking his head. Kara's stomach knotted. They didn't understand, none of them did. They had no idea what she had survived in the skis. The room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Kara's eyes, usually so steady, scanned every corner, every guard, every shadow. She had faced hurricanes and hostile fire, had lifted Marines from the jaws of death while the wind screamed through rotor blades like a banshee. And yet here she was, accused of something she didn't do. She could almost hear the echo of rotor blades, feel the vibrations through her fingertips as if they were tattooed into her bones. That's who she was. That's what they were about to forget. A guard stepped closer, jangling keys with an almost cruel rhythm. "Time up, Daniels," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of empathy. Kara's heart rate spiked. She had been through firestorms and lightning strikes, had seen entire missions collapse around her, but nothing had ever made her feel the way this room did, helpless, judged, ignored. She stood slowly, the handcuffs biting through her sweat-moistened wrists, and faced the door, expecting the next interrogator or the senior officer to step in. Her boots clicked against the tiled floor, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts whirling in her mind. Every second felt like an eternity. And then, the door opened. A figure entered, the very air around him heavy with authority. Admiral James Hollister. His crisp uniform bore the weight of decades, metals gleaming even under the dim fluorescent light. Every step he took toward her carried the authority of someone who had stared death in the face and commanded respect from men and women who did the same. Kara's stomach lurched. She had faced combat. She had stared down stormy oceans, but this gaze was a storm in itself. It was heavy, scrutinizing and piercing. "Release her," the Admiral barked, his voice cutting through the tension like a whip. Guards stiffened. The room seemed to contract. Every eye followed him, every whispered rumor and judgment silenced instantly. Kara's pulse raced. She froze, uncertain if she had heard correctly. "But sir," one of the officers began, hesitating, clearly intimidated by the Admiral's sudden entrance. "That's a call sign pilot's tattoo," Hollister interrupted, pointing directly at Kara's forearm. There, inked into her skin, was the symbol that had earned her a reputation among pilots and crew alike. A phoenix, flames curling and stretching, reborn from its own ashes. "She's flown missions you wouldn't survive reading about in a report. You don't handcuff a pilot who earned her call sign in combat." The handcuffs fell away with a metallic clatter, echoing like a liberation anthem through the room. Kara rubbed at her wrists, the raw skin stinging but irrelevant, relief mixed with lingering adrenaline. She felt the eyes on her, some curious, some resentful, some still skeptical. She dared not speak. Her voice would have faltered. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. The Admiral's expression darkened. "Because the mission is far from over," he said quietly, yet with a gravity that made her stomach twist. He didn't need to elaborate. The storm wasn't over. She could feel it, electric and dangerous, even through the walls of the detention room. Memories flickered behind her eyes. The helicopter blades cutting through hurricane-force winds, the smell of rain and smoke mingling, the cries of stranded sailors echoing in the air. Each life she had pulled from the jaws of death was proof that she belonged in the cockpit, not behind these walls. Yet now, the same people who had watched her save others questioned her legitimacy. Kara's mind raced. She remembered the storm she had survived just a few weeks ago, the way the ocean had boiled beneath her, how she had danced between lightning strikes to lower Marines safely into life rafts, how every decision had been a gamble with death, and how, against all odds, she had emerged victorious. She had a reputation, a call sign, a legacy, but here in this room it was reduced to ink on skin and whispers in the dark. The Admiral stepped closer. "Lieutenant Daniels," he said, voice calmer now but still commanding. "You're going back into the field. There's a mission that only you can handle. You've earned your place, not with papers or permissions, but with instinct, courage, and skill." Kara's pulse quickened. The reality hit her in waves. The handcuffs, the whispers, the skepticism. It was all a test. Not a legal one, but a test of resilience, of recognition, of proving that her abilities were more than a tattoo or a title. She took a deep breath, letting it steady her nerves. A guard, still wary, asked, "Sir, what exactly is this mission?" Hollister's eyes met Kara, and in that glance she understood the gravity without needing words. "It's going to challenge everything you've done before," he said. "You'll be flying into a storm, not just weather, but the kind you can't predict on radar, and you'll be taking lives into your hands again." Kara's stomach twisted. The adrenaline she thought was ebbing surged back with full force. She could almost hear the rotors, feel the wind, smell the storm on her tongue. She realized that whatever awaited her, whatever accusations had brought her here, this was why she had endured every grueling day in training, every night in the cockpit, every impossible flight. As she was led from the detention room, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, Kara glanced back at the handcuffs lying discarded on the floor. A symbol of constraint, yes, but also a symbol of what she had overcome. She walked with her shoulders squared, knowing the Admiral's faith in her was more than protocol. It was a vote of survival. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the storm waiting for her outside these walls was only the beginning. The question that lingered in her mind as the door shut behind her was one she couldn't voice aloud. Would try to handcuff a phoenix, and would they survive watching her rise? The door to the detention room swung open and Kara stepped into a narrow corridor, the chill of the air conditioning biting at her skin. Every footstep echoed off the walls, metal boots on tile, and she felt every eye in the hallway tracking her. The whispers hadn't stopped. Curiosity and skepticism followed her like shadows, but she didn't care. She was no longer a handcuffed pilot. She was Phoenix, and the Admiral was waiting. Admiral James Hollister stood at the far end of the corridor, near the war room doors, his broad frame silhouetted by the dim light beyond. He turned sharply as she approached. His eyes, gray and sharp as a winter storm, assessed her in silence for a long moment, as if weighing every memory, every mission, every flight. Kara swallowed hard, feeling her pulse hammering in her throat. "You know why you're here," he said, his voice carrying across the hallway. It wasn't a question. It was a statement and a challenge. Kara nodded, though the answer was complicated. "Yes, sir, but handcuffs." Hollister's lips twitched into the faintest smirk. "Never underestimate the bureaucracy, Lieutenant. They'll try to clip your wings any way they can." He gestured toward the doors. "Come on, time's wasting." The war room was dim, lit only by a halo of screens displaying maps, satellite feeds, and streaming sensor data. The hum of electronics filled the space, punctuated by the low chatter of officers and analysts. Kara's eyes darted across the room, scanning every detail. The rows of computers, the blinking lights, the shifting projections of coastlines and storm fronts. She had been in command centers before, but this felt different. High stakes. No margin for error. Hollister motioned for her to the central table, a sleek steel rectangle covered in holographic projections. She stepped closer, the warmth from the engines and monitors brushing against her rain-damp uniform. The Admiral picked up a laser pointer and tapped a point on the map. A jagged coastline lined with wrecked ships, a scatter of small islands, and swells of turbulent water. "These Marines," Hollister said, "are stranded after a covert insertion went sideways. Enemy drones tracked every known approach route. Conventional rescue teams couldn't get close without being destroyed. And conventional helicopters, well, you know why they didn't even try." Kara leaned in, the holographic storm clouds flickering over her face. Her stomach knotted, the weight of responsibility pressing down. She had flown in hurricane-force winds, lifted injured soldiers from burning oil rigs, and maneuvered through hostile territory. But this was beyond anything she had encountered before. Every instinct told her the mission was a trap waiting to happen. "Why me?" she asked, voice low but firm. "There are other pilots more experienced, maybe less decorated, less of a target." Hollister's eyes held hers unwavering. "Because you're Phoenix, you improvise when the world collapses around you. You see solutions where others see only risk. The Marines are counting on someone who won't hesitate when the stakes are impossibly high. And yes, the enemy may know your call sign, but that's part of why you're the only choice. They'll underestimate you. They always do." Kara let out a slow breath. She felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, that focused, honed energy that came when life and death converged. Her hands itched for the controls, the feel of the joystick beneath her fingers, the vibration of rotors reverberating through her core. She could almost hear the wind screaming past the fuselage, smell the storm on her tongue. Her mind spun, calculating angles, wind currents, extraction routes. Hollister leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Intelligence picked up an anomaly. Your flight path will take you through an area we've never cleared before. There are drones, but also something else, unidentified, possibly hostile, possibly experimental." Kara's pulse jumped, her eyes narrowed. Experimental. The Admiral didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid a sealed envelope across the table. Kara's fingers hovered above it, tension coiling in her stomach. She felt the weight of the room, the expectations pressing down. Every officer, every analyst, every whisper of doubt was focused on her now. She picked up the envelope. Inside, flight coordinates, encrypted communications, and mission-specific intel glowed faintly in the holographic light. But one detail caught her eye, a missing coordinate. "Sir," she said slowly, voice taut with concern, "there's a section here that's blank. A gap in the map, something's wrong." Hollister's jaw tightened. "Exactly. And that's why you're the only one for this mission. You'll navigate it. You'll make decisions on the fly, split-second, instinctive. Lives depend on it. And if you fail—" He let the words hang unfinished. The threat was unnecessary. She understood the stakes. Kara's gaze swept the room. Her team of co-pilots and rescue specialists waited in tense silence, hands twitching over controls, eyes locked on screens. They had no idea she had been handcuffed just hours ago, no idea of the insult, the accusation, or the indignity she had endured. And yet in their eyes she saw trust, reliance, belief. Hollister continued, "You're not just flying into a storm of weather. You're flying into a storm of deception. Someone tried to stop this mission before it even began, and if you survive, we'll find out who." Kara's jaw tightened. The anger surged, but it was channeled now, focused. Her mind ran through contingencies, maneuvers, backup plans. She knew the helicopter she would fly intimately, the vibrations, the optimal angles for wind shear, the stress limits of the fuselage. But she also knew that none of it would matter if someone betrayed them from within. "Sir," she said, meeting his gaze, "I'll do it. But I need to know one thing: can I trust my team?" The Admiral's eyes softened just for a moment. "You'll have no choice but to trust them, Phoenix, and I trust you to lead them through." She swallowed hard, adrenaline and tension coiling in her chest. Every fiber of her being screamed that this mission was going to push her beyond her limits, beyond everything she had ever survived. And yet, a thrill coursed through her veins. This was what she was born for. Hollister straightened, signaling the end of the briefing. "Get ready. You leave in 30 minutes. Debrief with your team, check your equipment, and remember, there's no margin for error. Lives are in your hands. Make every second count." Kara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The room hummed with anticipation, but she focused on the envelope, the holographic storm before her, and the impossible task ahead. Somewhere deep in the back of her mind, a voice whispered, "They handcuffed a Phoenix once. They'll never forget her name again." And as she walked toward her team, the question lingered, unspoken but heavy in the air. Who had tried to stop her, and would they live to see her rise from the storm? The war room hummed with tension, a low mechanical drone interlacing with the frantic tapping of fingers on keyboards. Kara Daniels stood over the central table, her eyes scanning the holographic projections like a hawk circling prey. Waves churned against jagged coastlines, enemy drone patrols marked in ominous red, and the faint glow of scattered islands represented the stranded Marines she was about to rescue. Every projection blinked with danger. Every line and curve demanded attention. Every second counted. Her breathing was steady, but inside, her heart thundered like the rotor blades she would soon command. 30 minutes had passed since the Admiral's briefing, and already Kara's mind was calculating contingencies, wind patterns, extraction points, enemy trajectories, and mechanical limits of her Apache. She had memorized every curve, every sensor reading, every critical angle she might need to maneuver in zero visibility. "Lieutenant Daniels," Hollister's voice cut through the room, firm yet commanding, "these Marines are out of standard range. Conventional rescue routes have been destroyed. The enemy drones are trained to detect all heat signatures. GPS is unreliable in the area. Your flight path will require improvisation." Kara didn't flinch. She knew improvisation. It had saved her life more times than she could count. But as she examined the map closer, a cold realization struck her. There was a missing coordinate, a gap in the grid she couldn't explain. "Sir," she said, pointing, "there's a blank spot here. Why isn't it mapped? If I fly through it, I could run straight into anything." Hollister's jaw tightened. "That's classified. You won't be getting details until you're airborne. Consider it part of the test." His eyes locked onto hers. "You're the only one I trust with this. Don't let that blank space define the mission. Adapt, survive, rescue." Kara exhaled slowly. She didn't need the explanation. She never did. She trusted her instincts over maps, gut over protocols, experience over manuals. The blank coordinate didn't scare her. It excited her. The challenge was perfect, the kind she thrived on. A lieutenant approached, carrying a tablet. "Phoenix, we've got wind shear data and thermal readings. The storm is intensifying faster than predicted. Winds could reach 75 knots in localized bursts. Visual range may drop below 200 feet in seconds." Kara glanced at the readings. Her stomach twisted, but not from fear. It was anticipation. "Good," she muttered. "That means we'll have cover, but timing will be everything. Any delay and the Marines could be exposed. Any miscalculation and we'll be targets ourselves." The team around her exchanged nervous glances. They knew Kara had faced storms before, but never like this. Never with the added threat of enemy drones, missing intel, and a mission whose success or failure would decide life or death. Hollister spoke again. "You'll have a co-pilot, but you'll make the call. One mistake, one hesitation, and it's over. I won't sugarcoat it. You're going in blind in places no pilot has ever flown, and someone on the inside may want you to fail." Kara froze for a fraction of a second, the thought of internal betrayal igniting a flash of anger. Her hands flexed, tightening over the edge of the table. She didn't need enemies outside when the threat might be inside, watching, waiting, sabotaging. But that wasn't going to stop her. Phoenix never ran. She adapted, she rose, she conquered. Her eyes swept the room, taking in her co-pilot, a young lieutenant named Tyler Hawk Martinez. His gaze was tense but determined, hands ready at his station. Kara had flown with him in training simulations, but never in a live, high-stakes mission like this. She read his tension, calculated how she would need to guide him, and nodded slightly. "Follow my lead. Stay sharp. Trust instincts over instruments, and no unnecessary chatter." Tyler swallowed hard, nodding. "Yes, ma'am." Kara moved to the prep table where her flight suit awaited. Every strap, buckle, and pocket had been meticulously checked before her arrival. She slid into it with practiced precision, the leather and Kevlar molding to her form like armor. She flexed her fingers, feeling the familiar vibration of control in her bones. This was her world. The outside world could doubt her, handcuff her, even try to destroy her reputation. but inside the cockpit she was invincible. Hollister stepped closer, lowering his voice. Kara, remember this. The enemy drones aren't your only concern. Communication lines may be jammed, sensors may fail, and there's evidence someone has tampered with mission intel. Trust yourself, trust your instincts, and trust no one you don't see with your own eyes. Phoenix, don't get caught. Kara's jaw tightened. That one word, Phoenix, was more than a call sign. It was a reminder of every mission she had survived, every impossible extraction, every life she had saved against the odds. And now it was a challenge. Not just a mission, but a trial that would test every skill she had ever honed. The countdown to deployment began. Engines roared to life in the hangar, echoing through the walls like thunder. Kara's stomach twisted with excitement and anticipation, the familiar pre-flight jitters mingling with fear and adrenaline. The helicopter's nose tilted slightly as her team loaded supplies, every second a reminder that failure was not an option. As she climbed into the cockpit, Tyler beside her, she allowed herself a brief glance at her tattoo, the phoenix rising from flames on her forearm. It had been handcuffed hours ago, dismissed as ink on skin by people who didn't understand her. Now it burned as a symbol of resolve, of experience, of power. It reminded her she had survived worse, and she would survive this too. The blade spun faster, a deep, resonant thrum vibrating through the floor. The storm outside was visible now, lightning cracking across the sky like skeletal fingers reaching for them. Rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the edges of reality, creating a tunnel of chaos. Kara gritted her teeth, hands steady on the controls, eyes scanning every sensor, every movement, every shadow of the storm. Her co-pilot's voice cracked through the comms. "Phoenix, I'm seeing drone signatures approaching fast from the west corridor. Thermal's picking up something else. Not sure what it is." Kara's heart leapt, adrenaline spiking. Enemy drones, or the unknown threat Hollister had warned about. Either way, hesitation was death. She leaned forward, hands firm, instincts razor-sharp. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Hold your position, follow my lead, and no one moves without my signal. We get these Marines or we die trying." The storm's howl grew louder, the wind slamming against the fuselage, lightning illuminating the cabin like strobe lights. Kara felt the pulse of the machine beneath her, the rotors slicing through rain and darkness, every vibration a reminder of the lives depending on her precision. And then, as she turned toward the first extraction point, the radar flared red, multiple blips closing fast, not the drone she expected, something bigger, something she hadn't prepared for. Her stomach tightened, her mind raced. She knew one thing for certain: this mission wasn't just dangerous, it was a trap. And whether she survived or not, the truth of who had set it up and why was still out there waiting. Kara clenched her jaw and whispered to herself, as if to summon the storm within her. They handcuffed a phoenix once, let's see if they can stop her now. The helicopter surged forward into the tempest, rotor blades slicing through darkness and rain, carrying the lives of the stranded Marines, and the weight of betrayal into the unknown. And in that moment, the world outside became a blur of wind, water, and danger, leaving only one certainty: the storm had begun. The hum of the war room was deafening to Kara, though it was mostly composed of low-level chatter, the buzz of electronics, and the occasional sharp click of a keyboard. She sat at the edge of the large steel table, unrolling the flight schematics on a glass display that glowed under her fingertips. Rain streaked down the hangar windows outside, a constant reminder of the storm raging beyond the base, a storm that mirrored the turbulence building inside her chest. Every mission was dangerous, but this one had an urgency, a chaos, a malevolence she could feel pressing against her skin. Admiral Hollister approached silently, as though the floor itself had no right to announce his presence. He leaned over the table, scanning the holographic storm cloud and coordinates Kara had been studying. "Phoenix," he said quietly, "everything you see is accurate, but there's one thing I need you to understand. Someone on the inside may have deliberately withheld information. You may not have all the pieces before you leave. Kara's stomach tightened. She had suspected as much after noticing the missing coordinate, but hearing it confirmed set her mind racing. Her eyes narrowed as she tapped the display, highlighting the gap in the grid. "Sir, if that area is compromised and we fly straight into it, we could lose everything." Hollister's gray eyes softened just slightly, but the edge never left his voice. "That's why I sent you. Instinct over instruments, experience over procedures. Phoenix, you're the only pilot I trust to make a split-second call if the unknown shows up in front of you." Kara exhaled slowly, letting the tension flow from her shoulders. Every fiber of her being screamed readiness. She had handled storms before, enemy fire before, mechanical failure before, and yet the uncertainty gnawed at her. The missing coordinate, the drone activity, the whispered warnings, it wasn't just a storm outside. It was a storm inside, invisible but lethal. Her co-pilot, Tyler Hawk Martinez, shifted nervously beside her. "Lieutenant Daniels, this data is intense," he said, glancing at the swirling blips of enemy drones and thermal interference. "We've got simulated extractions, but nothing like this." Kara turned sharply, locking eyes with him. "Simulations don't save lives, Hawk. Instinct does. Focus. I'll guide, you follow. No hesitation. Understood?" Tyler swallowed hard and nodded. Kara's reassurance didn't erase the fear, but it anchored him. The Admiral stepped back, signaling that he had given his piece. The rest of the team moved closer, communications officers, intelligence analysts, weather specialists, all prepared to answer any question, provide any data, any edge that could save the Marines' lives. Kara's eyes swept the room, scanning faces, nodding tension, uncertainty, and faintly admiration. Some questioned her past, some whispered about her handcuff incident, but now, with Hollister's direct involvement, those whispers carried less weight. Hollister spoke again. "You've trained for extreme conditions, Phoenix. You've flown through hurricanes, rescued stranded units, and faced hostile fire. But this mission is different. The storms, the drones, the missing data, it's a test, not just of your skills, but of your judgment, of your ability to see threats no one else sees. And there's something else." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. Kara felt her pulse quicken. The tension was a living thing, crawling along her spine like an electric current. "There's evidence," Hollister continued, "that someone inside the Navy tried to stop this mission, deliberately, possibly to jeopardize the Marines or compromise the operation. You may be walking into a trap, planned and deliberate." Kara's hands tightened around the edge of the table. The sting of betrayal was sharper than any storm she had ever flown through. Someone had tried to stop her before she even reached the skis. Her anger flared, but it was a controlled burn, sharpened into focus. She would not allow hesitation. She would not allow doubt. "Sir," she said, voice steady despite the surge of emotion, "if someone's compromised this mission from the inside, I need to know who's on my team and who is." Hollister's expression hardened. "You don't, and that's part of the test. You'll know by action. Watch, trust instincts, respond, adapt. The Marines' lives and your team depend on it. Don't look for betrayal, look for survival." Kara exhaled, letting the cold calm of preparation take over. She moved her hands over the holographic map, tracing the extraction route, calculating angles, wind currents, drone trajectories. Every variable mattered. Every second mattered. The storm outside was violent, but this storm, internal, invisible, treacherous, was the one she needed to master. One of the intelligence officers, a young ensign named Briggs, hesitated before speaking. "Phoenix, thermal interference readings are inconsistent. Enemy drones are adapting in real time. Some signals appear, then vanish. We're unsure if it's electronic countermeasures or something else." Kara nodded. "We adapt, we react, we don't wait, and we don't panic." She could almost hear the rotor blades in her mind, the vibration, the wind, the smell of rain mixing with the tension in the air. This was her world, her battlefield. Tyler leaned over her shoulder, voice low. "Lieutenant, this missing coordinate, the unknown, are we walking into a minefield?" Kara glanced at him, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. "Hawk, we're walking into the storm, and we'll dance through it." Hollister stepped closer once more. "One final piece of intel. Communications may be jammed. You won't have updates unless you intercept signals directly. The enemy may try to force you off course. It's up to you to recognize the pattern, improvise, and get the Marines out alive." The room went silent. Every officer held their breath, every eye on Kara. And Kara Phoenix stood tall, absorbing every detail, every risk, every nuance of the impossible task laid before her. Her fists clenched around the edge of the table. She could feel the weight of the mission pressing into her bones. Then the Admiral's gaze softened, just slightly, but it carried the full weight of belief and expectation. "Phoenix," he said quietly, "you've been doubted, handcuffed, underestimated. Today you'll remind everyone why your call sign is more than a tattoo. It's a warning." Kara's heart surged, adrenaline mixing with fury, focus, and anticipation. She looked at her co-pilot, at the team, at the stormy map before her. Every fiber of her being screamed readiness. She had survived worse. She had risen before, and she would rise again. As she slid the helmet over her head, locking it into place, the holographic storm glimmered before her eyes, casting shadows over her determined face. The adrenaline thrummed through her veins, her fingers tingling, ready to dance across the controls. The team fell silent as she addressed them, voice calm, sharp, commanding. "Check your equipment, reconfirm all coordinates. Remember, the Marines are counting on us. Follow my lead, trust instincts, and no one moves without a signal. This mission is high stakes. Mistakes cost lives." Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the stormy coastline and the churning sea like a flashing warning. Kara knew that each strike mirrored the dangers ahead, unpredictable, violent, lethal. And then a red blip appeared on the radar, unidentified, moving fast, closing in on the extraction point. Kara's stomach twisted. She recognized the signal. It was not the drones they had been warned about. It was something else, something deliberate and possibly deadly. Her pulse spiked. She tightened her grip on the table, whispering to herself as if invoking the storm within. "They handcuffed a Phoenix once. Let's see if they can stop her now." The war room seemed to fade around her, leaving only the storm, the unknown blip, and the weight of the lives she was about to carry through chaos. The moment hung, taut as a wire, before she moved decisively toward the helicopter. The storm was coming, and so was the first test of everything she had learned. The hangar doors rumbled as the massive blades of the Apache helicopter began to spin, slicing through the humid air like a predator awakening. Kara Daniels, call sign Phoenix, climbed into the cockpit, her fingers instinctively brushing over every lever, every gauge. The storm outside had intensified, clouds churning violently, lightning flashing in jagged streaks that illuminated the tension etched across the crew's faces. Rain pelted the windshield, a relentless percussion that threatened to obscure their path before they had even lifted off. Her co-pilot, Tyler "Hawk" Martinez, adjusted his harness, eyes flicking nervously to the sensors. "Lieutenant, visibility's worse than expected. Thermals fluctuating, wind gusts over 70 knots. Kara's jaw tightened. She had expected the storm, but the numbers still sent a thrill of danger down her spine. This was no ordinary extraction. Every second, every decision was a balance between life and death. "Hold steady, Hawk," she said, voice calm, steady, commanding. "Remember what we rehearsed. Instinct over instruments, eyes open, adjust for the unknown." The engines roared to life, a deep, resonant thrum vibrating through the floor of the helicopter. The wind gusted, shaking the fuselage, while the storm seemed to roar back, daring them to advance. Kara's hands tightened on the controls, the vibrations seeping into her bones. The radar flickered erratically, the enemy drones unpredictable, the missing coordinate looming like a void in the map. Yet every danger spurred her focus. "Phoenix," Hawk said, voice tense. "We've got multiple drone signatures approaching fast. Some are close, too close." Kara's pulse surged. She had expected the drones, they were part of the mission, but the numbers, the speed, the coordination, something was off. They weren't acting like programmed surveillance units. Someone or something was guiding them, waiting to see if she would hesitate. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she ordered, her voice steady, even as adrenaline raced through her veins. "Keep the rotor stable. Watch the thermal feed. We're moving in." Outside, the storm raged in full fury. Lightning split the sky in jagged lines, thunder echoing across the cliffs and over the turbulent sea. Waves smashed against the jagged rocks below, spray flying high into the wind, threatening to obscure the extraction zone. Kara's eyes darted between the cockpit displays and the chaotic storm outside, mentally plotting trajectories, wind shear angles, and safe zones to hover. Every calculation was a heartbeat. Every misstep could be fatal. The first enemy drone zipped past the tail rotor, narrowly missing it by inches. Hawk swore under his breath, and Kara's fingers flew over the controls, banking the Apache sharply. Rain lashed the windshield, and the storm seemed to reach into the cockpit itself, clawing at their nerves. "They're testing us," she muttered, more to herself than Hawk. "Someone wants to see how far we'll go before we break." The Phoenix surged forward into the storm, blades cutting through the chaos like knives. Kara's mind ran faster than her hands, processing wind gusts, thermal drafts, enemy positions, and the missing coordinate. She calculated each maneuver as if composing a symphony of survival, every movement precise, every adjustment critical. "Visual on Marines," one of the spotters on the comms shouted. "They're on the southern cliffs, exposed, no cover." Kara's heart skipped. There they were, tiny figures against a jagged, rain-slicked cliff. Every second they remained visible increased their vulnerability. She had to act, and fast. "Bank left 40 degrees, she instructed, Hawk, voice clipped and precise. "We're going in hot, stay sharp for wind shear." The helicopter tilted sharply, rain hammering the fuselage, and for a terrifying instant the horizon disappeared, replaced by a swirl of black clouds and white lightning. Hawk's hands flew over his controls, sweat slicking his palms. Kara's pulse matched the rotor's thrum, a rhythmic, powerful beat she could rely on. They reached the cliff face. The Marines huddled, drenched and terrified but alive. Kara adjusted altitude, her eyes scanning every inch of the storm for threats. And then she saw it, a red blip on the radar closing fast. Not a drone, not part of the mapped threat, something bigger. Someone had sent it intentionally, waiting for her to engage the rescue. "Red blip," she shouted over the roar of the storm. "Unknown trajectory, closing fast from the west." Hawk glanced at her, pale but alert. "It's coming fast, what do we do?" "Divert slightly," Kara commanded, her mind calculating angles, escape velocity, and wind drift. "We'll pick up the Marines and fly through the blind spot. Follow my lead, no hesitation." Lightning split the sky again, illuminating the enemy's position, fast-moving, sleek, and lethal. Kara's instincts sharpened. She wasn't just a pilot, she was Phoenix, the one who rose from chaos every time, who had been doubted and handcuffed, and now had a chance to prove herself again. The helicopter tilted, blades straining against the wind as she executed the maneuver. Thunder cracked like a whip, and the sea below erupted in spray as the Apache skirted dangerously close to the cliff face. Every second was measured, precise, calculated with instinct honed over years of near-impossible rescues. "Marines, prepare for liftoff," she called over comms. "Harnesses secure, stay low until we clear." The Marines responded, their fear tangible but their trust implicit. They had no idea who Kara was, what she had endured, or the storm she had faced just hours earlier. They only knew she was their lifeline, and lifelines didn't falter. Hawk gritted his teeth, hands steadying the rotors as Kara guided the Phoenix toward the extraction point. Rain lashed at the cockpit, lightning flashed in the sky, and the unknown red blip closed with terrifying speed. Then came a flash of recognition in Kara's mind. The red blip wasn't just random. It was orchestrated. Someone had anticipated her movements, the storm, the rescue path. Someone was waiting to test her, to trap her. She clenched her jaw. They underestimated a Phoenix, she whispered under her breath. They'll never make that mistake again. Hawk's voice cut through her focus. Lieutenant, we've got turbulence incoming. The blades are shaking severe. Kara's eyes flicked to the displays, then outside. The storm was violent, unpredictable, and relentless, but she thrived in this environment. She adjusted the controls, muscles coiling, mind racing. Every second she kept the helicopter steady was a second closer to saving lives. The Marines hooked themselves into the winch lines. Kara kept the Phoenix steady, despite the violent sway of the rotors, despite the wind, rain, and the unknown blip closing fast. Her instincts guided every move. She felt the vibration of the blades, the pulse of the machine, and the weight of lives depending on her decisions. As the first Marine lifted into the helicopter, the radar flared again, multiple blips this time converging from different directions. Kara's pulse jumped. The storm was one threat. The unknown enemy was another, and the missing coordinate, still a void she had to navigate blindly. Her mind raced. She calculated angles, predicted movement, and prepared for evasive maneuvers. Hawk followed her lead, eyes wide but trusting. The Marines were lifted one by one into the Phoenix's belly. Then came the moment Kara had feared and anticipated. The unknown red blip moved directly into their path. A shadow in the storm, faster than the wind, precise, lethal. Her fingers tightened on the controls. She had one chance to maneuver through the chaos, one chance to save the Marines, one chance to survive the first encounter with the unknown. The storm raged, the unknown approached, and the Phoenix surged forward into history or disaster. The roar of the storm was deafening, yet inside the cockpit, Kara Daniels felt a cold, creeping awareness. The red blip, the unknown threat, wasn't acting like the drones they had been trained to evade. Every movement, every adjustment seemed eerily anticipatory, almost human in precision. She tightened her grip on the controls, eyes scanning the storm and radar with laser focus. Something wasn't right. Hawk, she said, voice clipped, I need full sensor data. I want a 360-degree visual on that blip. Now. Tyler Hawk Martinez's fingers flew over the touchpad. The radar swirled, the storm creating interference, yet there it was, the blip, but something didn't add up. Its trajectory adjusted in real time, moving precisely to cut off their extraction path. Kara's gut tightened. This isn't random, she muttered, her instincts screaming. Someone's guiding it. Someone wants to force us into a trap. A crackle in the comms caught her attention. A voice she recognized, Commander Grayson, one of the mission coordinators back at base. Phoenix, confirm extraction coordinates. ETA. Kara froze. The voice, calm and professional in the comms, didn't match the panic rising in her gut. Commander, do you copy? I'm in visual range of the Marines. Static, then silence. Kara's pulse quickened. She keyed the mic again. Commander, respond. No answer. Her hands clenched, eyes narrowing. Someone was interfering, someone on the inside. Her thoughts raced back to the Admiral's warning, trust instincts, watch your team, someone may want you to fail. And then it clicked. The anomalies in the mission prep, the missing coordinate, the perfectly timed enemy blip, it wasn't just the storm. It was sabotage. Someone had orchestrated every obstacle from within, hoping she would fail. Hawk noticed the shift in her demeanor. Lieutenant, what is it? They're inside the command chain, she said, voice low but fierce. Someone's guiding the enemy. They've set this up from the start. I need to improvise. We can't trust updates. We can't trust instructions, and we can't trust the blip. Hawk swallowed hard. So what do we do? Kara's eyes scanned the storm, the churning sea, and the exposed marines below. Time was bleeding away. We do what we do best. We trust ourselves, instincts first. Follow my lead and keep your eyes open. No hesitation. And Hawk, watch my six. The Apache tilted, blades slicing through the wind, as she executed a tight maneuver around the cliff face. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the Marines struggling to secure themselves. Kara's hands moved with fluid precision, adjusting for wind shear, the unknown blip closing in, and the treacherous cliffs below. As the first Marine hooked into the winch, Kara's instruments flickered. Another red blip appeared closer, faster, perfectly timed. It was no accident. Someone was feeding enemy coordinates in real time, manipulating the situation. Kara's jaw tightened. The betrayal was real and the consequences were immediate. One misstep and everyone could die. "Hold steady," she shouted. The rotors vibrated violently as she banked the Apache, her eyes scanning the storm for any possible cover. She realized with a grim clarity that the mission was no longer just about surviving the storm or the unknown enemy. It was about outsmarting someone who had intimate knowledge of every move. Hawk's voice was tense. "Lieutenant, they've locked onto our approach. Heat signature match, manual override, someone in the loop." Kara's pulse surged. She felt anger, betrayal, and an adrenaline-fueled clarity all at once. Someone had tried to stop her in the war room. Someone had tampered with the mission intel. And now they were using the storm, the drones, and the unknown blip to execute a trap. Her mind raced. The Marines were still unsecured, the storm still violent, and the enemy closing fast. Every second counted. Every move had to be perfect. She made a split-second decision. Divert left. Drop altitude 500 feet. Use the thermal draft to mask our heat signatures. Hawk responded instantly, adjusting the controls. The Apache tilted dangerously, blades groaning against the storm's resistance. Rain laced the cockpit, lightning blinding and relentless, yet Kara's focus never wavered. Every maneuver was calculated, every motion a blend of instinct and skill honed over years of impossible missions. As they banked and dropped into the thermal draft, the unknown blip surged, then disappeared. Kara's eyes narrowed. The sudden disappearance wasn't a retreat. It was a setup, a prelude to the next strike. "Marine secured," she barked into the comms. The winch crew responded quickly. 2 down, 5 to go. Kara's hands moved with relentless precision, adjusting altitude and angle, compensating for wind gusts that threatened to toss the helicopter into the cliffs below. Every Marine lifted safely, yet the tension in the air was suffocating. The enemy, or the traitor inside, was waiting for her next move. A sudden, violent jolt rocked the Apache. Kara's stomach dropped. Systems flickered. Warning lights blared. Someone had tampered with the internal controls, manual override sabotage. "Lieutenant," Hawk shouted, struggling to stabilize the rotors. "They're inside the system." Kara's jaw tightened. She had faced enemy fire, storms, and impossible extractions, but betrayal from within was something else entirely. It was personal, insidious, and deadly. Every second now carried double the risk, the storm outside and the enemy inside. Her mind raced. She had seconds to act. She manually disengaged the compromised systems, relying entirely on instinct, muscle memory, and the feel of the helicopter beneath her. Every vibration, every shudder of the rotors, every subtle movement of the aircraft became her guide. "Steady," she muttered under her breath. "We survive this, Hawk. We survive, we expose the traitor." The last Marine hooked into the winch. Kara's hands moved faster than thought, guiding the Apache through the violent storm and treacherous cliffs. Every obstacle, wind shear, lightning, unknown blip, and sabotage, was met with precision, instinct, and relentless determination. Finally, as the last Marine cleared the cliffside and the Phoenix leveled off above the stormy waves, Kara allowed herself a brief glance at the radar. The red blip reappeared, moving fast, but this time she was ready. Every evasive maneuver, every split-second decision had led to this. She would not be caught off guard again. And then another realization struck her, cold and sharp. The sabotage had been coordinated with the blip's movements. Someone had orchestrated the attack, timed to perfection, watching every decision, predicting every reaction. Her stomach twisted. The mission was not over, the storm was still raging. The unknown enemy was still hunting, and the traitor, someone inside their own ranks, was still waiting to strike. Her eyes narrowed, jaw set in steel. The phoenix had risen before. She would rise again. But the question burned in her mind, unanswered and deadly. Who had betrayed them, and how close were they to ensuring everyone died? The storm wasn't finished with her yet. The wind screamed around the Apache, a violent symphony of chaos that threatened to rip control from Kara's hands. Lightning split the sky in blinding flashes, illuminating the cliffside and the churning sea below. The Marines were all aboard, harnessed into the belly of the helicopter, but the danger wasn't over. The unknown blip, the orchestrated threat guided by someone inside the Navy, was still hunting them. Every instinct, every nerve, every ounce of her skill was focused on survival. "Hawk status," Kara shouted over the roar of the storm. Hawk's voice was tense but steady. All Marines secured, systems stabilized manually, unknown blip still tracking at high velocity from the west corridor. Kara's jaw tightened. She didn't flinch. Every mission, every impossible extraction she had ever survived had prepared her for this moment. But this was different. The storm was a relentless force of nature. The blip was a human or mechanical predator, and betrayal had poisoned the very chain of command meant to support them. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "We fly low under radar interference and use the thermal drafts to mask our signatures. Follow my lead, Hawk. Trust instincts, not instruments." The Apache dove toward the cliffs, the rotors buffeted by violent gusts. Rain lashed the cockpit. Visibility dropped to mere feet, and every shadow in the storm seemed like an enemy waiting to strike. Kara's fingers danced over the controls, adjusting pitch, yaw, and lift with flawless precision. Hawk followed her lead, eyes wide, adrenaline flooding every vein. "Unknown blip closing fast, 300 meters," Hawk yelled. Kara's mind raced. She knew the aircraft, knew the storm, knew the enemy's patterns. Now all she needed was to anticipate the unseen traitor coordinating this attack. Her eyes flicked to the instruments, then outside. She calculated angles, wind drift, and rotor stress simultaneously, a mental equation of survival. "Divert right 20 degrees, drop altitude 50 meters, she commanded. The helicopter tilted sharply, blades groaning, yet she held steady. The blip followed, its speed relentless. Someone had predicted her route, but Kara had a trick they hadn't anticipated. "Deploy flare countermeasures," she ordered. The heat signatures of the Apache flickered against the storm, masking them from the blip's tracking systems. For a split second, the red dot wavered, lost. Kara's pulse raced. This was her moment. "Marine secure," she shouted, eyes scanning the cliffs. "Prepare for extraction, exit point Alpha." The storm seemed to fight her, gusts slamming the Apache toward the rocks, rain battering the windshield, but she held steady. Every maneuver was calculated, every movement precise. She could feel the machine beneath her, responding to her commands as if alive, a partner in survival. Suddenly, a burst of fire erupted from the side radar. Kara's stomach dropped, enemy drones attacking in coordination with the unknown blip. She banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a collision. Hawk shouted in panic, but Kara's voice cut through, calm and commanding. "Hold steady, adjust rotor pitch. We're not dying today." Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating a flash of movement below, the cliffs, the waves, and the treacherous drop. Kara's instincts kicked into overdrive. She calculated wind shear, rotational lift, and thermal drafts, adjusting the flight path midair. Every Marine's life was tethered to her skill, every split-second decision a potential difference between life and death. The unknown blip reappeared, closer, faster, almost directly in line with their exit path. Kara's eyes narrowed. It wasn't random, it was precise. Someone inside knew the exact trajectory she would take. Betrayal had become a weapon, and she would not allow it to succeed. "Evasive pattern Delta," she shouted. The Apache twisted through the storm, diving low beneath radar interference, banking sharply to avoid the blip's intercept path. Hawk followed flawlessly, eyes wide, adrenaline and trust in every movement. As they cleared the immediate threat, a sudden realization hit Kara. The storm wasn't the only hazard. Mechanical sabotage inside the Apache could have been worse than she imagined. Systems flickered again, hydraulics, autopilot, radar, all sabotaged to force them into failure. She gritted her teeth. Manual override, full systems check now. Her hands moved with surgical precision, disengaging compromised circuits, rerouting power and recalibrating instruments. The helicopter responded, though strained, and she felt a surge of controlled relief. "Phoenix unknown blip retreating," Hawk asked, eyes glued to the radar. Kara didn't relax. Not retreating, waiting, calculating. Someone inside is orchestrating the next move. Stay sharp, this isn't over. The storm began to thin slightly, though lightning still cracked like whips in the sky. Kara guided the Apache over the cliffside, past the churning waves, toward open water. The Marines were safe for now, but the betrayal's shadow loomed, dark and unresolved. Every instinct screamed that someone was still manipulating events, still watching, still hopping to see failure. Her mind flicked back to the Admiral's words, "You're the only one I trust to see through the unknown. Watch instincts, adapt, survive." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She would survive. They would survive. And she would expose the traitor after the Marines were out of immediate danger. Suddenly, the radar flared again, a new anomaly. Not a blip, not a drone, something bigger, faster, and deadlier than anything they had faced yet. Kara's pulse surged. She exchanged a glance with Hawk, who mirrored her tension and focus. The storm was still raging, the unknown threat still hunting, and the betrayal inside their ranks still unresolved. Her jaw tightened. "Buckle up, Hawk, this is the final stretch. We get the Marines out or we die trying, no excuses." The Apache surged forward into the storm, dodging debris, skimming waves, and weaving through lightning. Every Marine clung to harnesses, terrified but alive, trusting Kara's skill implicitly. She felt the wind, the pulse of the rotors, the fury of the storm, and the lurking danger of betrayal all as one. And then from the radar in the corner of her eye she saw it. The orchestrator, the hand that had sabotaged her mission, moving fast, coming for the Phoenix. Her stomach tightened, adrenaline spiking. She knew this confrontation was inevitable. Someone on the inside had nearly destroyed them, but now the tables were turning. The storm had tested her, the enemy had hunted her, and betrayal had shadowed every step. But Kara Daniels' Phoenix was not done yet. The next move would decide everything: survival, trust, and vengeance. The Apache surged forward, wind screaming against the rotors, lightning splitting the sky in jagged flashes that illuminated the storm-tossed waves below. Kara Daniels, call sign Phoenix, felt the weight of the mission, the Marines, and the betrayal pressing into her every nerve. She had anticipated storms, enemy drones, and impossible extractions, but nothing had prepared her for the orchestrated sabotage from within. Ahead, the radar flickered again, a large, fast-moving signature, faster and deadlier than any drone. Kara recognized it immediately: the orchestrator. Someone inside the Navy had coordinated every obstacle, every blip, every interference to try and destroy the mission. And now they were moving to finish it. "Hawk," she barked over the roar of the rotors, "status." "All Marines secure, Lieutenant," Hawk replied, voice tight but steady. "Unknown entity closing fast. Thermal shows human or humanoid pattern. Could be inside a control craft or drone override system. No ID yet. Kara's pulse surged. Her instincts screamed that this wasn't just an attack, it was a showdown. Someone had tried to handcuff a Phoenix, doubt her, sabotage her mission, and now, face to face, or rotor to rotor, they were about to find out why she had risen every time before. "Hold position," she ordered. "We draw them out, one mistake and they go down." The storm raged with renewed fury, wind buffeting the Apache as Kara maneuvered toward open water, away from the cliffside hazards and the Marines' extraction point. She adjusted the flight path, banking sharply to the left to obscure their thermal signatures, while the unknown signature mirrored her moves like a shadow with lethal precision. "Lieutenant, they're matching our maneuvers," Hawk shouted. "They know every twist, every angle." Kara's jaw tightened. "Then we change the rules." She toggled the countermeasures, deploying flares and electronic jamming to create confusion. The storm itself became an ally, lightning flashes masking movement, rain scattering thermal readings. The orchestrator reacted instantly, but Kara had anticipated one step ahead. Her mind flashed back to the handcuff incident, the tattoo that had earned her the Admiral's respect. Every insult, every doubt, every obstacle had shaped her, trained her, steeled her for this exact moment. She wasn't just a pilot, she was Phoenix. She had risen from flames before, and she would rise again. The unknown signature veered closer, suddenly visible as a sleek, armed drone-like craft, its movements too precise for standard AI. Kara realized the truth. Someone had manually piloted it remotely, guiding it with knowledge of her every maneuver. Someone had inside access to mission data, perhaps even physical access to base systems. "Target identified," Hawk yelled. "It's a Navy-class drone with override capabilities. Someone's controlling it from the inside." Kara's pulse surged. She had expected the storm, expected the drones, expected danger, but never betrayal at this level. Her hands moved faster than thought, plotting an intercept, a maneuver designed to force the operator to reveal themselves. "Brace for evasive interception," she shouted. The Apache twisted through the storm, dodging lightning, spinning in a tight arc, blades groaning under the strain. The enemy drone followed, aggressive, calculated, relentless. Kara's mind raced. She could feel the pulse of the helicopter beneath her, every vibration a signal, every shift of air a clue. She toggled the override jammer, aiming to disrupt the drone's remote controls. Sparks flickered across the cockpit instruments. The drone veered sharply, caught off guard. "Now, Hawk," she shouted, "engage manual intercept." Hawk responded, guiding the Apache in a daring spin, blades slicing the storm like knives, as the enemy drone faltered. A surge of adrenaline propelled Kara forward, focus, precision, instinct. She had faced impossible odds before, and now the orchestrator was about to be revealed. Lightning illuminated the skis as the drone began to malfunction, flailing against the countermeasures. Kara saw movement on the storm's edge, a secondary craft, a small Navy hover unit, human silhouette visible even through the torrential rain. The traitor. Her heart pounded. The orchestrator had been confident, meticulous, and close to succeeding, but Phoenix never stayed down. "Prepare for direct engagement," she said, voice cold, steel under fire. "We're drawing them in. One move, one mistake, and we expose them." The hover unit fired a pulse, trying to disable the Apache. Kara banked sharply, dodging, every maneuver precise, every second life or death. The Marines inside held their harnesses tight, terrified but alive, trusting her implicitly. The storm's fury seemed to rise, wind tearing at the Apache, waves crashing like walls below. Kara's hands were a blur over the controls, instincts guiding every tilt, every turn, every evasive maneuver. Hawk's voice was tense but unwavering. "Lieutenant, we've got them in visual range." Kara leaned forward, eyes locked on the silhouette. The traitor, A high-ranking officer stood in the hovercraft, controlling the attack remotely, believing themselves untouchable. Kara's pulse surged with righteous fury. "Engage countermeasures, deploy net override," she shouted. The Apache's systems fired an electromagnetic pulse, catching the hovercraft's electronics off guard. Sparks erupted, and the unit began to malfunction. The trader's control flickered, then failed. "Direct visual," Hawk yelled. "They're exposed." Kara banked low, slicing through the storm, rotors just above the waves, closing distance. The hovercraft struggled, electronic systems failing under the storm's interference and the Apache's countermeasures. The Marines were safe. The orchestrator was exposed, and Phoenix was rising, stronger, faster, unstoppable. Kara maneuvered the Apache alongside the failing hover unit. With surgical precision, she deployed a grappling tether, immobilizing the craft. Sparks flew, the operator struggling, cursing, powerless against the storm, the Phoenix, and the helicopter's might. She leaned close to Hawk, voice low and determined. "We secure them. Mission complete, but we do it on our terms." Hawk nodded. The helicopter tilted, blades straining as they pulled the hovercraft into containment. The storm raged, but Kara was untouchable in her focus, in her mastery, in her resolve. Finally, with the Marines safe and the orchestrator captured, Kara leveled the Apache, cutting through the tail end of the storm. Lightning cracked across the horizon, illuminating the storm's remnants and the calm aftermath. The Phoenix had risen once more. The Admiral's voice crackled over the comms, calm and commanding but tinged with relief. "Phoenix status." "All Marines secured, Admiral," Kara replied, voice steady but tinged with exhaustion and triumph. "Threat neutralized. Mission complete." A pause, then, "Lieutenant Daniels, report to debrief. You've earned every commendation and then some, not just for skill, but for courage, leadership, and rising from the impossible." Kara exhaled, eyes scanning the storm-tossed sea below. Her fingers brushed her tattoo, the Phoenix rising from flames on her arm. Once dismissed, once handcuffed, once doubted, now it burned with the validation of experience, survival, and triumph. Hawk glanced at her, wide-eyed and awed. "Lieutenant, you're incredible." Kara gave a faint, tired smile. "We're incredible. Everyone did their part." Her gaze returned to the horizon, storm clouds breaking into pale light. The worst was behind them for now, but Phoenix always rose, and the sky, the storm, and the impossible would never hold her down. And somewhere in the distance, the captured orchestrator glared, powerless, realizing that underestimating a Phoenix had been their gravest mistake. The Apache lifted higher, slicing through the thinning storm. Sunlight began to pierce the clouds, casting streaks across the ocean. Kara Daniels, Phoenix, handcuffed no longer by doubt or disdain, had proven herself, beyond the mission, beyond the betrayal, beyond the storm. She whispered under her breath, a mantra and a declaration. "They handcuffed a Phoenix once, they'll never do it again." And with that, the helicopter surged forward, carrying the Marines, the truth, and the legend of a pilot who could not, and would not, be stopped.